Conduct Committee. So the first item on today's agenda is welcome and apologies. So can I first of all welcome Chief Superintendent John Patterson in his new role as the head of PSD. So welcome, John. And could also welcome Elaine Galbraith. Elaine, I believe, has agreed to join us for the remaining of these committee meetings this year, and she's going to give us an insight into the work that is happening around Dame Ailish Angelini's reports. Can also welcome to this meeting, although he's not joined us yet, but he will, Sergeant Paul Harkins, who has been seconded from PSD into the Scottish Police Authority, and also by a colleague, Chief Inspector Melanie Wade, who won't be joining us today, but she's also seconded. So we're sure that they will all add to the team. I've got a number of apologies. I've got apologies from SPA member Fiona McQueen, also from the Acting Chief Executive, Chris Brown, ACC Alan Spears, and from the SPA Complaints Department, Stuart Milne. Is there anything, any other apologies or any welcomes that I have missed? No? Okay.
No, just waiting on attendees from the park joining, but I would say you're still okay to go on ahead without them, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And in today's meeting, it's online. Hopefully we'll have a more blended approach going forward, but there's only 3 SPA members here today, so if I should unfortunately drop off, then we'll suspend the meeting and Colette will do our, we'll let you know, and we'll do our level best to all reconnect as quickly as possible. And I note that Ilya's just joined us or about to join us. Hi, welcome Ilya.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, morning. We just made a very initial start, just doing welcomes and apologies. So nothing to worry about there. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, can I ask, is there any declarations of interest today?
No.
No, okay. Moving on to 1.3 then. It's the meeting of the Complaints and Conduct Committee held on the 25th of November 2021, and I could ask members to approve the draft minute. Okay, so that's approved. Thank you. 1.4, we move on to the action log. There are 2 actions in there, one of which is proposed foreclosure, and I think we'll speak to that later on in the agenda today. Anybody got any comments or questions on the action log? Oh, Colette?
Sorry, Chair, could we just approve the public version of the private minute from the 25th of November?
Oh, did I not do that? Sorry, I'm racing ahead.
No, you're all right.
I'm glad you're here to keep me right. Okay, so with that helpful prompt from Colette, can I ask you to approve that public minute? Okay, so we'll take that as approved. Okay, moving on back to the action log. Any comments, questions on that, or are we content with to close the one item given it appears later in the meeting? Yeah, everybody happy with that? Okay. And 1.5, which is the decision in accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders to take items in private. So items 9 to 12 we have down as being in private. Are members content for that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to section 2, which is our first substantive paper today, which is the SPA quarterly report, quarter 3. And Darren, I believe you're going to lead us through this.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just highlight some key points from the report. This is a regular SPA quarterly report providing information, complaints handling performance within quarter 3 in comparison to the previous 6 quarters. Following a spike in cases out with the SPA remit in Q1 of this year, I reported last time that in Q2 we'd thought figures had returned to the level typically seen during the last financial year, although Q3 has seen a slight rise against Q2, but not to the extent seen in Q1. It's important to recognise, though, within that overall figure, the SPA continued to receive significantly more complaints than it's responsible for, the majority of which are in fact for Police Scotland. As members are aware, we launched a revised SPA complaints page on our website, including a new interactive online form, which is intended to ensure that the public are signposted appropriately. While it's probably too early to draw conclusions, the early indications are that if we exclude contact from previous correspondence, the proportion of additional people contacting us for matters out with our remit has in fact reduced, and we'll obviously continue to monitor that. In respect of complaint cases and kind of constituent allegations which are within the SPA remit, these are broadly steady over the past 7 quarters, albeit with a slight reduction in the last 2. During the year to date, all complaint cases have been from members of the public. And Figure 5 shows that the allegations within the remit of the SPA by subject of complaint, and as previously, there are no discernible trends that have been identified. The majority of allegations have not been upheld. I think the important thing to recognise here that I haven't drawn out previously, and it probably kind of links to conversation last time in respect to the Police Scotland reports, is a significant proportion of matters are actually resolved through early stage resolution and are therefore not in a form which are capable of being upheld or not upheld. So that figure actually incorporates that early stage resolution at this point. It's important to note that point. But what we will commit to doing going forward is to split that in future reports to distinguish between early stage resolution complaints and otherwise complaints either upheld or not upheld. Figure 7 shows the average timescales to close relevant complaints, and I just want to draw your attention to the additional development we've included this time, which is, as well as providing an overall average of timescales, we've also linked to Dame Eilish recommendations, drawn out individual cases over the period which have been over the PERC statutory guidance 40 working day period. And to note, as we have previously, that the reason for these small number of cases was due to their particular complexity, and we will continue to report with this breakdown going forward. Another thing I want to specifically raise is in relation to complaints in respect of forensic services. As you'll be aware, complaints within the SPA remit in respect of forensic services have typically either come to the SPA directly or via Police Scotland. And as a result, my team sought to engage with forensic services directly and met with them in November, really to make sure that we've been cited on any complaints, relevant complaints, which have been received directly by forensic services themselves in line with our complaint handling procedures. So forensic services have undertaken a review and there was identification of only one case in the last 2 years where a notification was missed. We're satisfied that that was satisfactorily closed and resolved. The statistics have been amended accordingly in your report, and we've had assurance from forensic services that improvements have been made to their procedures to prevent recurrence in future. Beyond the statistics, in terms of key engagements, as you know, there is a strategic oversight group which predates the group established as part of the Dame Eilish National Governance and Reporting Arrangements. Whilst that group has not met since the last committee, there has been some business undertaken which culminated in the publication of a version of the Memorandum of Understanding which exists between Police Scotland, the SPA and PERC. That's been published, demonstrating partner commitment to transparency, and is available from the PERC website. A link is provided in the paper. An update is provided in terms of the National Complaints Handling Development Group. Just to note that the chairship has now rotated to the SPA, and our initial focus will be on developing a delivery plan for the year ahead. Planning has continued in respect of the joint audit of Police Scotland complaints, and an item is on the agenda shortly to discuss that. I wanted to also draw your attention to some specific work, again linked to Dame Eilish's recommendation around team development, development of our own SP corporate complaints team. So in the last period, the team have completed an auditing techniques and approaches course through the British Standards Institute, which will assist with the upcoming joint audit, but also with future planned dip sampling and ongoing audit arrangements. We have also undertaken the SPSO complaints investigation skills course to further supplement training that the team undertook previously through Queen Margaret University. We have undertaken a benchmarking review of our own complaints handling procedures against the SPSO model complaint handling procedures. And we additionally plan over the forthcoming period to benchmark against an ISO standard, an international standard in respect of complaints handling. As the Chair's mentioned, we welcome the secondment of Chief Inspector Mel Wade and Police Sergeant Paul Harkins from Police Scotland Professional Standards Department, which we're confident will support ongoing continuous improvement within the team, as well as shared learning between our respective organisations. And the final point I would note is additional opportunities which have arisen in the last wee while. Firstly, we had contact from our counterparts in the Policing Authority in the Republic of Ireland, and there's been a kind of mutual sharing of information with a view to supporting benchmarking activity, which my team will take forward, and understand again that the authority are in contact with both Police Scotland and the PERC in this regard. We have also been invited to participate in a forthcoming international research project, which involves CYPER, and that is looking to potentially establish international standards in respect of police complaints handling. So myself and the team will be meeting with them shortly, with further meetings to be arranged thereafter. Apologies, that was probably a fuller update than I would normally give, but some really key developments over the last wee while. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Darren. You know, it's a very full report, but I think you actually highlighting it in the way you did is really useful to us. So with that, I'll open it up to colleagues, to board members. Does anybody have any questions at this point for Darren?
Yes.
If I see Grant's got his hand up, so Grant, if you could ask the first question, and then Paul, if you could then come in after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And Darren, thank you very much for taking us through excuse me, that report, which is pretty comprehensive. I've just got two questions, one for clarification and one about resources. In figure 1, there's a category which has now appeared to be determined. Would I be right in assuming that these are the cases that are mentioned later on the agenda in the private session?
That's correct, Grant. The point here is that there are still further determinations to be made as to whether these cases are within, whether they are relevant complaints and whether they are within the remit of SPA. It's simply the case that at the point of development of the report, that determination hadn't yet been made. That's
fine. I just wanted to be sure that I was looking at the right thing, basically, and understanding the link with that. The second one is, I'm very encouraged with all the various developments about benchmarking, training, and so on, and cooperation with other forces. Clearly, that has an implication on resources of your own team here. And I just wondered if you felt that, given all these developments, whether you've got the right skills and capacity to be able to move these forward, or does this involve further recruitment into the team?
Grant, I'm content that we have the right capacity within the team. I think we've made, I suppose, we've made great strides over the last wee while in terms of our, I suppose, business as usual activity. And that's given us the space now to focus more around about continuous improvement, broader engagement, benchmarking, etc. So I'm content that between myself and the team, but also to note, as you're aware, with the secondment of colleagues from PSD into the team as well, that will further supplement the capacity of the team over the next while to kind of to enable that focus.
Right, thank you. Because linking back to figure 1, I'm conscious that the total number of cases received is still significant, but once you actually drill down, as you've mentioned, the ones that are out with the SPA remit, that brings it down to a much smaller number. But whilst the new website is probably early days, is there anything that is emerging from what you've discovered in dialogue with the people who've sent a complaint to the SPA, but it has to be redirected to Police Scotland, that requires further education in terms of what's on the website as to what to do?
So I think I'd mentioned in the past some activity that was undertaken, albeit prior to the revisions to the website, which explained why oftentimes people contacted us. And I suppose to be clear, there are those cases which are very obviously not for us. There are others which are grey areas. So for instance, a connection that's often made is I have a complaint about my experience with Police Scotland. The Chief Constable is the head of Police Scotland. The SPA is responsible for complaints against senior officers. Therefore, I'm bringing a complaint to the SPA. So there are there are those, I suppose, nuances within this. But yeah, I mean, I think, as I say, it's early days, but actually, in the interactive form that we've produced and the guidance we've produced is intended to very specifically guide people to the appropriate authority, and the early indications are that that's having the impact. As I say, we will continue to monitor, and indeed, if there are additional changes we need to make to provide further clarification, we will do. I think the other thing I mentioned previously, Grant, was, whilst, as you're aware, there's a wider SPA sort of digital review of our website as a whole. We were conscious of not waiting for that to kind of make changes ourselves, which is why we pressed ahead at the time we did. But nevertheless, as I understand, a contract has been awarded to undertake that work, which I believe has commenced. And the intention was, in terms of, I suppose, firstly, the professional expertise of the organisation who comes in to do that review. They will undertake their own assessment of the website and will also undertake further user testing downstream. So we're absolutely not resting on our laurels here. We will continue to test and ensure that the website is as clear as it possibly can be. But as I say, that there are always, there will always be those curious cases where there's a question mark as to whether it is for the SP or not. Hence some of those cases that that are in that to be determined. In some instances, it's not immediately obvious.
Thank you. I was really just pursuing that partly because I know that even to go through the process of deciding whether it is a relevant complaint or not still involves a fair amount of work, and it was how that all fits in with all the other human resources, if you like, required to do all the business as usual alongside all the developments that I was wanting to pursue. So thank you. Thanks for clarifying, Darren.
Okay, thank you for that, Grant. Paul?
Apologies, Chair, I'd scrolled down just a little too far and it was a question I got for another item, so apologies. I have nothing on this.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Does anybody else like to come in? No. Okay, so thanks for that. I think just a couple of things just to underscore what Grant has said. I think everybody welcomes that investment in the team, with the purpose, of course, to add value in terms of the public interest, the outcomes. So that is really encouraging. And I would also support the point that Grant is making about what is and isn't a relevant complaint, and navigating your way through that for a layperson can be, really difficult. And there is a big commitment, of course, to openness. Here within Police Scotland and the SPA, but also within, you know, Scottish Government and the public sector as a whole. So complaints is a key part of that. So helping people to get to the right place, it's a learning opportunity, but it also, you know, allows people to get their concerns addressed. So working on that is really encouraging to hear that as well, Dan. So thank you for that. Okay, there's no more questions on that. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Police Scotland's Professional Standards Quarterly Performance Report, Q3, and Chief Superintendent John Patterson is going to lead us through this. So, John, over to you.
Morning, Chair, morning, members, and thanks again for your kind words. Welcome me to the committee. I'm very much looking forward to working with the SPA and indeed colleagues that are on the call. Similar to Darren, I appreciate that this is a normal report that comes to the committee. I will summarise some key points before inviting questions through yourself, Chair, if that's in order. Looking at the executive summary, there's 4 key points that I would like to draw to your attention, Chair and members. The number of complaints received during Q3, there's been a decrease of 4.9% compared to Q3 in 2020-21, being 1,566. Continuing on the theme around frontline resolution, members will note that 48% have been resolved early, so that's either locally or through the PSD National Complaints Handling Unit. The other part I'd like to draw to members' attention is the 57 statutory referrals made to PERC, which is a decrease of 17.4%, and members will also note that 43 of those 57 were marked as no further investigation by PERC. In terms of the Crown directed, the Crown Office directed Article 3 and 5 following Dame Ellie Shangelini, members will be aware that that process came into place in October. So there's been 64 such referrals which were in Q3, 23 of which were not investigated. And members will recall that Article 3 relates to areas around assault or where there's an allegation that the arrest has been unlawful. The other thing I'd like to draw out from the exec summary is the analytical work and action that's taken place, and it just touches on what Darren had mentioned earlier as well. That's highlighted in pages 5, 6, 7 and 11. I'd also like to draw members' attention, Chair, if I could, to the work that's been done around the conduct unit, because I know that's something that you're interested in. There's 300 preliminary conduct assessments have been undertaken by Professional Standards in the year to date. That's a 7.5% increase on the previous year to date. During that same period, just over 66% resulted as misconduct requiring improvement action or misconduct no action. Similarly, assessments made by the National Gateway Unit, that's sitting at 2,117, which is a 3.8% increase. Out of that, there was 735 during Q3, which represents a 15.4% increase in that quarter. In terms of the other parts of the report, Chair, I'd like to focus on some issues which I know that members will be interested in from the anti-corruption unit. 90 inquiries have been instigated year to date, which is broadly similar to the previous year. The predominant allegations that have been reported to the anti-corruption unit relate to disclosure of information and inappropriate association. Another issue which is not just unique to Police Scotland but is the subject of much conversation across the UK, and right so, is the abusive position by police officers or members of staff in order to conduct predatory sexual behaviour. As members will be aware, that's subject to an ongoing review within Police Scotland at the moment. 2 other areas under anti-corruption, the unauthorised disclosure of sensitive information remains a significant concern to us, and because unauthorised disclosure can compromise inquiries, investigations, and also lead to that loss of public trust and confidence. The use of corruption by serious organised crime groups also remains a strategic priority for Police Scotland and is monitored by the anti-corruption unit, and we look for patterns not just in Scotland but across the UK through national assessments. The last point I'd like to draw to your attention, Chair, is the organisational learning. It's something that I know has been discussed on many occasions in many different forums, but it's at the heart of what certainly Police Scotland and indeed PSD is doing. And I'm grateful to colleagues in PERC as well for their support and assistance, and also in HMICS. We're looking to embed that not just across the professional standards area, but the other part of ACC Spears portfolio under governance, audit and assurance, and getting true organisational learning across all recommendations and observations that come into Police Scotland. And in terms of Q3, on page 24 of the report, there are some areas that have been highlighted for members' attention that we've picked up. Chair, I wouldn't intend to go into any more detail at the moment. There is a comprehensive report there, and I'd propose to pause there and take any questions that yourself or members may have. Thank you. Okay,
and again, thank you for the report and for highlighting a number of important areas. I'm sure there will be a number of questions, and I see that Paul Leary has his hand up. So, Paul, if I can go to you first of all.
Yes, thanks very much for the report. Can I just get behind some of the figures here? I'm looking at the figures in East, where in 5 complaints are up by 9.5%, and for the PYTD, and I'd like maybe a bit more explanation about why that's the case. Is there something particularly of concern in Fife? And similarly with the contact and control centre in the East, which is up by 24% against the 5-year average. Can you maybe give us a little bit more colour about what's gone on there?
Thank you, Mr. Reedy. Yes, as highlighted on page 6, that is the subject of ongoing analytical work. We are working with the divisions and C3, as members will know, that PSD has monthly meetings with the command teams in the areas, just to drill down behind the stats a bit more. With the change in the complaint handling model, as members will recall, it came to PSD in May. One of the things that's crucial is that PSD continues to work with the division to understand exactly what does sit behind that. You will see there that there's the 9.5% increase. It's lower volumes in relation to COVID, but more broadly, they suggest that the volume of complaints was a low volume year, but there's a higher than average level. But actually drilling down as to what's behind that is some of the ongoing analytical work supported by PSD and the division. And if Chair and Mr. Reedy, I'd be more than happy to bring back the results of that analytical work and discuss with members at an appropriate time.
Yeah, I would welcome that, but that's up to you, Chair. The contact centre, what's the story there?
What we find normally with contact centre is the number of the complaints will relate to the time taken to answer calls, which I know has been discussed in many other forums. So that would tend to suggest, from the information that I've had to date, is what's behind most of the complaints for the contact centre. Except
I thought the performance had improved, and I'm looking at it in comparison to the West, and the West, while there are more complaints, the direction of travel is downwards in terms of percentage.
Well, what we'll find is that the complaints will be depending on what area has been routed in for the calls. But again, right, as it's highlighted, that's part of drilling down into that finer detail. But the high level information suggests it's around to waiting times for calls to be answered.
Well, that's hugely helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay. Grant, do you have any questions?
Yes. Excuse me. Yes, thank you. John, a very comprehensive report. Thank you very much. I was wondering about chart number 4 and table 1, the allegations received by area and period. There's quite a spike in quality of service, first of all in policy and procedure and also service delivery. I appreciate you're still working on these, and obviously we've had the period of COVID, so which may have had quite an impact on some aspects of these. But I wondered to what extent you're able to, even before you've been able to drill down into the resolution of these complaints, able to pick up trends and pointers that can actually lead to the introduction of additional training in areas where the complaints are coming, to try and actually avoid these continuing to grow. And if you could say a little bit about how the interaction between what your team are doing and into the professional training of officers going through Tullyallan and in the divisions, I wondered if there's anything in there that could be helpful in actually cutting down the likelihood of these continuing to rise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCrae. Yes, the most common theme that's coming through just now is about the provision of information from officers providing updates to people who've had cause to contact the police. Putting on my previous hat as divisional commander, I can give you the assurance that that's something that we remind officers of on a regular basis. It is something that we put forward through the wider discussions that takes place every month between PSD and divisions, and also that there's notes go out from PSD to divisional commanders and support and service delivery superintendents, where we do, through this analytical work that I've mentioned, draw out key themes, so that it may well be in one particular area, but we highlight it across the whole country, so that what we don't get is a movement. We address it in the east and it may then appear in the west because we haven't shared that. It allows people to look at it. In terms of training, members will probably be aware that we're looking to introduce, probably in the second quarter of the next financial year, a preventions and professionalism programme. So it's something that we're working on at the moment, which will be looking at the standards, not just the standards of professional behaviour, but looking at all the learning that I made reference to earlier, how we then embed that from the initial police training through the probationer training programme, but also through the new My Career First Line Managers training, and again making sure that there's regular updates that are put out across the organisation where key themes occur. As I mentioned earlier, I'm hugely grateful to colleagues in PERC and HMI for their insights, and we make sure that we get those updates circulated as well. So where an issue may arise, whether it's a complaint handling review or an observation that's been made for one particular area, again, we make sure that goes out across the whole country. We don't just speak to the division or department concerned. We will do that, but equally we should be sharing that with all the commanders and heads of departments so that they've got that visibility.
Thank you. Thanks very much, John. And a sort of follow-up question, which might be linked to that, which probably links back to your past role yourself. On the anti-corruption unit, there's a reference on page 23 to unauthorised disclosure of sensitive information. I wondered if that is starting to spiral, perhaps. Is that something that can be overcome by appropriate reminders to everybody involved in that sort of area of activity to actually stress the importance of not releasing sensitive information, or actually giving greater guidance as to what is allowable to be released and discussed and what's not?
Yes, there's two parts to my answer. There's the first one where there's a deliberate release of sensitive information, and that's obviously hugely concerning, and that's where the anti-corruption unit would conduct an assessment and an investigation if we received information to suggest that was taking place. The second part from it may well relate to an unconscious release of information, and that would sit in the information security side, which again used to be part of my wider portfolio in governance, audit and assurance. But to give the chair and members confidence that we do regularly, again, make sure that reminders are put out across the organisation. The detective superintendent in charge of the anti-corruption unit and her team regularly give inputs to probationers and to other training courses at Scottish Police College. And again, if we have information that suggests that sensitive information is being released or there's challenges, then we put that out through practice notes to the division. The other element that we've got as well, and again it's broadly known that we have workforce monitoring systems in place, so we do have additional checks and balances built in, which should we get any suggestion that information has been released, that we've got measures to go in and look at that, as well as the proactive measures that exist, where the systems automatically check if information has been released under the incorrect government marking system heading. So again, that can be blocked and flagged up.
Right. Thank you very much. That's very encouraging. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you,
That's all
members.
from me.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in at this point? So, John, can I just ask you a question in terms of the complaint handling reviews, and maybe in his report, Ilya might pick up on this as well. I'm not sure. So 57 went through, 43 no further investigation. So 14 of them you got feedback on, and you've mentioned earlier about the desire to be a learning organisation. So these 14 that there's more work, there's lessons perhaps to be learnt from them. Have you got any initial comment on that? And would it perhaps be useful to highlight what the lessons were in the report that you provide to us every quarter?
Thank you, Chair. I made reference to that, and I did note that Ilya was going to give an update. We're a reference on page 24, the organisational learning, the examples that have been identified in Q3. Some of those will relate to the complaint handling reviews where we would put that information in just to demonstrate that we have acknowledged that, and that will be part of the work moving on. Again, Chair, if you so require, I'd be more than happy to provide additional information, or if the information that's contained there is helpful in itself.
Yeah, I mean, the information is helpful in itself, but I think if there's themes emerging from this, it just completes the picture for us. So we can speak this through in terms of the detail required off table, and we've got a workshop at the end of the month. But it helps with the transparency. It completes the picture for everybody if we can actually see that. You've highlighted that that the desire to be a learning organisation, and this is something that's right and proper, but it is always difficult to achieve in any organisation. People are very good at identifying lessons, but actually learning them and embedding them is a tougher ask. So, and I know it's been discussed in other forums, but in terms of PSD, have you got any thoughts on how you will embed the lessons into the department?
Yes, Chair, and thank you for that question. I made reference earlier to the other part, or one other part of ACC's portfolio, which is governance, audit and assurance. And there's an organisational learning development programme that sits there, and members, and indeed Mr McCrae might be aware from some of the discussions at the audit committee, that what we're looking to do is make sure all recommendations come to a central point, then key themes, as members have highlighted before, are identified. Rather than dealing with recommendations or issues in isolation, we then look to embed them. Areas specific to PSD, I mentioned the Preventions and Professionalism programme that we're looking to introduce. That's where the PSD specific ones will be harnessed and rolled out across the organisation, so we can demonstrate that learning and the improvements. But that will all go back to ACC Spear's overarching group under DCC Taylor, so that the members can have the confidence that where a recommendation comes in, it's not looked at in isolation, it's looked at across the organisation. The most appropriate area is then identified to deal with it, and then that's fed back, and with the support of HMICS as well, because they provide that additional scrutiny on certain recommendations. The members, whether it's at this committee or others, can get the assurance that that work has been done. But in terms of PSD, that will be the Preventions and Professionalism programme.
Yeah. No, and thank you for that. So, and thanks for the questions. And I think what you highlighted there is that desire to become a learning organisation, the mechanisms that are being put in to achieve that. And I'd just like to highlight that analytical work that you in response to the questions that were asked by Paul and also by Grant. It's so important to get behind, what the figures are actually saying and get that understanding. So I appreciate your response on that. Okay, thank you for that. If there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next item in today's agenda, which is the PERC quarterly report on Police Scotland handling of complaints. So if I could pass over to Ilya.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, committee members and colleagues from Police Scotland and the HMICS. I'll provide a brief summary of the update report provided by the PERC. Overall, I think it would be fair to say that during Q3, We haven't observed any significant variances. I think in terms of the number of the applications that we received, you'll see we received 67 applications for complaint handling review, which is probably within our average. There is overall, we noticing a slight increase in terms of the number of the individual allegations or heads of complaint within each application. So that's that's something that has been slowly increasing over the last a year or two. But in general, in terms of the number of members of public that come to PERC requesting a complaint handling review, has been relatively steady. Looking at the timescales, we provided a little bit of an update. The committee has been informed in terms of the timescales that are involved, specifically in terms of the information that we require during the complaint handling review. You'll see that we, Police Scotland, are aiming to provide the initial set of papers within 14 days, but often there is additional information that is required during the review. In total, I think the timescales during Q3 are at 1.7 months, which is obviously something that we're working together with the Professional Standards Department to try to improve, because naturally, if we can reduce this timescale, it will certainly improve our own timescales, and we'll be able to deliver the complaint handling reviews much quicker, which is not only of benefit to members of the public asking for reviews, but also, quite importantly, of benefit to officers who are subject of the complaints, and also it would be of benefit to Professional Standards Department to receive the outcome and, in many respects, the assurance the complaint have been handled to a reasonable standard. In terms of number of the CHR reports, I think I tried to indicate there will be slight variance between the information that was in John's report. Now, it's primarily due to the fact that we perhaps count the number of the CHR reports slightly different. I can provide a little bit more information about it, but ultimately, when the PERC complete the complaint handling review, and we, if there are any outstanding criminal proceedings, we contact Crown to make sure that there are no issues in terms of the issuing of the report. So at that stage, the complaint handling review is completed, but we may not necessarily be able to release the report to Professional Standards Department. So any variance between the stats in my report and Professional Standards Department report is primarily arising out of the fact that Professional Standards Department are looking at the reports that they've actually received, rather than the PERC is providing, I suppose, our stats in terms of complaint handling reviews that have been completed during the Q3. So from that perspective, I think I can give maybe good news to John and his team that there was additional case that was completed in Q3, which had a quite significant number of heads of complaint. Majority of those were reasonably handled. So in terms of Q3, we consider that 71% of the complaints that we've reviewed have been handled to a reasonable standard. So that's very positive in terms of the sustained improvement on the last couple of years, because the committee will be aware that last year Police Scotland achieved 71% of reasonably handled complaint from our reviews, and that certainly has been a big improvement. So it's reassuring that Police Scotland has managed to maintain this level of progress. In Q3, you will see we've issued, we completed 36 CHR reports, 161 heads of complaint had been reviewed. On average, you will see that there is 4.5 individual heads of complaint per report. Again, you will see from the comparison from Q1, Q2 that it's a gradual increase. as I indicated, the number of reasonably handled complaints has risen to 71%, improvement on the previous quarter. You will see from my report that the Professional Standards Department operates in 3 regional hubs. PSD East has performed the best. 79%. That's very good in view. I fully accept that it's not 100, but it's a very significant improvement on where we were, let's say, even 2 years ago. PSD North in Q3 was 63% and West 65%. So there are certain regional variances. Nationally, year to date, we're sitting at 68% reasonably handled. Again, not far off last year's 71%. Similarly, year to date, the PSD East is performing the best again, 76%. So that's again very, very good indicator. Thereafter, I think we provided an update in terms of number of recommendations and reconsideration directions. There are no reconsideration directions subject to supervision. Simply not necessity for that in terms of the cases that we've reviewed so far. We provided some details in terms of the implementation rate. Up to 31st of December. These figures probably have improved now, and usually throughout the year these numbers grow, and we probably will see that in Q1 of the next year we'll be getting closer to a full implementation of recommendations. Probably by Q2 of the next financial year we should be seeing that we similar to previous years in terms of the implementation of the recommendation, we should be probably sitting at 90% and higher. There is always a bit of a time delay in these matters. We've also provided a breakdown in terms of the recommendations. You'll see that in terms of the kind of headlines, 36% of recommendations relate to the sufficiency of complaint inquiry. 39% of recommendations relate to the quality of the final response, and 12% of recommendations relate to the assessment and recording of the relevant complaints. I think that's probably all in terms of the update on the CHR related work. So I'll pause just now and let members ask any questions.
Yeah, as always, Ilya, thank you. Appreciate you giving context to the report, and I'll open it up to members for any questions that they may have at this point. Grant.
Thanks, Chair. And Ilya, thank you very much. Again, a very clear report and a lot of information where you explained the context of it. I just want to touch on 2 things. One is you mentioned that some of the allegations coming in are a bit more complex. I'll pick that up. And I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit about how that is emerging. And the second area is really much into the recommendations. Really on your the final page, you've talked about insufficient inquiry having been carried out into the complaint, and also the quality of the final response letter. Now, John Patterson has already referred to additional training coming through in relation to writing response letters, but I wondered if you could clarify in relation to insufficient inquiry whether in fact there are any trends coming through in terms of what's missing in terms of being insufficient, and in terms of the letters, is it the things that are missing from the letters, or is it just the way they're written? For example, are they being written in plain English, if you like, that are helpful to the recipient, or are they being written in too much jargon, if I put it that way? It's just to try and actually get a better feel for what that is, because I fully appreciate that it's very, very difficult sometimes to get people to write plain English letters in a way that takes away the jargon and it's meaningful to the recipient. without making them think this is not really getting to the bottom of what I've complained about. Thank you.
Yes, Grant. Thank you. I'll start with your first point in terms of the complexity of the allegations. I think over the last 3 years, we've seen frontline resolution and CARO unit really coming into its own and taking care of quite effectively, by the looks of it, of low-level complaints. And the figures that John has presented in terms of 48% are something that has been a very, very positive development. But also during this time, I think, in my view, the general public has become more aware of the PERC and our role. There are a number of high-profile investigations ongoing, and what we're seeing is that in terms of serious, complex cases, sometimes members of the public raise complaints arising out of those missing persons inquiries, murder investigations, historical sexual abuse investigations, very complex matters, very difficult issues. Sometimes investigations are quite protracted as well. So in that regard, we do get a number of cases that are arising out of those complex investigations. Those often have a quite significant number of heads of complaint. So for example, a fortnight ago, looking at the cases that are under review, I identified 10 cases that had almost 200 heads of complaint between them. So that's that causes us operational issues a little bit, because naturally we need to make sure that review officers allocated to dealing with cases like that are sufficiently experienced, have relevant knowledge and expertise to tackle some of the complex issues that are being raised. So in that regard, we can see a lot of cases that raise very, very difficult questions for Police Scotland, and I'm not saying that Police Scotland is not good at addressing them. It's just the complexity, I think, of the work that Police Scotland is undertaking is increasing, and with that, the complexity of complaints or expressions of dissatisfaction increases as well. And in many respects, members of the public are, exercising the right to express dissatisfaction about the service they have received. And again, because of, I think, a greater awareness of the PERC and our function, I think these individuals come to PERC too, either if they're not happy with the response they receive from Police Scotland, or perhaps simply to receive an assurance that Police Scotland has handled their complaint appropriately.
Right, thank you. Just before you go on to the other point, does that actually place particular challenges on resourcing the PERC team with people of the appropriate skills and number to actually resolve complaints in a sufficiently prompt manner, and equally maybe enter between how Police Scotland are able to do that as well? I mean, as things are becoming clearly more complex, I think that has a bearing on resources for both of you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think in terms of PERC, we certainly have strengthened our team over the last few months. So from that perspective, absolutely. I think from the PERC's perspective, the more complex cases take longer naturally to review. There, you know, in terms of the volume of the information that we have to consider, is can be quite significant as well. So it's a matter of balancing it, you know, our resources between, you know, the complex cases that may take a little bit longer, and at the same time looking at, you know, cases maybe not as complex, not as difficult for us to progress, and trying to get those completed expeditiously. So we have adjusted how we approach it as well. So in that regard, we're you know, we've set up what we consider almost expedited team to look at, you know, cases that are perhaps not as complex, and try to get through those without any unnecessary delay. But at the same time, we recognise that the complex cases that are coming to us with, let's say, 20 or 25, you know, allegations, we won't be able to, you know, review it perhaps within normal timescales, and I suppose it's just a matter of effective, you know, making sure that there is effective communication with the complainer, that they're updated on the progress, so that you know, so that they're aware that their cases are looked at, that they're being taken seriously. And I think it's the same issue for Police Scotland as well. I fully appreciate that the 56 days timescales that are set in the statutory guidance will be applicable and probably achievable in the majority of cases, but there will be maybe, you know, 10-15% of cases that are very complex, that require much more thorough inquiry, and will not be completed within 56 days. And again, in terms of our guidance, in terms of the CAPSOP, in terms of our discussions with the Professional Standards Department, in our view, that's okay, as long as complainers are fully updated on the progress and things are, you know, progressing and not delayed unnecessarily. So yeah, it's it can cause issues in terms of in terms of timescales and capacity. I think in terms of Police Scotland, and John may correct me if I'm wrong, I think in more complex cases, those may be tasked to a specialist department, where, you know, who have dealt with the case to deal with. Rather than PSD. So there is always that option where matters are complex because of their nature and dealt by the specialist department of the Police Scotland. So there is always, I think, an option, even under the new model, to refer those complaints to the specialist department to progress. So,
okay, thank you. Because I think you're right in saying that keeping the complainant informed is key to this, because managing public expectation generally is probably an increasingly difficult challenge, as people expect fairly instant responses to everything nowadays.
Indeed. So I think it's, in terms of your second point, Grant, in terms of recommendations. So the final response, you're quite correct to mention plain English, and in some respects that, you know, that it can be an issue. For example, if the final response uses abbreviations that, for example, a member of the public doesn't understand, so that could be an issue. Identification of the officers may be an issue as well. There's been in the past a move to not identifying an officers, which we have consulted with various parties, including Professional Standards Department, and reached what we think a reasonable compromise in terms of default position being that the officers are named unless there is any specific concerns that you know, may justify not naming the officers in the final responses. In terms of inquiries and sufficiency of inquiries, I think this is again, the issues may arise where we, during the review, may consider that additional inquiries were necessary and proportionate given the nature of the complaint, and perhaps have not been undertaken. So again, it's it's on a case by case basis. I think it's an issue that I think causes probably a little bit of not conflict, but perhaps disagreement amongst all policing bodies and their oversight organisations in terms of finding that balance. You know, what is proportionate in terms of addressing the complaint, and yeah, so it's not something new. It's something that we're trying to address, working with professional standards department. I think one thing I think it would be fair to say as well that in terms of the complaints reviewed in Q3, it is very unlikely, in my view, that any of them have been, have been made to Police Scotland within Q3. There is a significant, just looking in general in terms of the timescales for John's team to progress the complaints through the initial complaint handling, and thereafter the member of the public has 3 months to come to PERC. After they receive the final response letter, and then the PERC's review itself, the chances of the whole process taking 3 months are next to zero. So we're probably looking at the in terms of the data I'm presenting today that we observed from Q3 from our reviews. Those complaints probably go back to most likely Q1, if I was to guess. So we're probably looking still in majority, we're probably looking at complaints that have not been handled by the new model yet. There will be some, but I think we're probably looking at still a little bit at the legacy model, where a lot of these complaints have been handled by the divisional complaint handlers. And this is where I suppose a little bit of catch-22, because you want to make the improvements, but ultimately with the new model, making certain learning points or pointers almost feels a little bit redundant, because the new model, under the new model, the same complaint handlers at the division will no longer be involved in the complaint handling. So I think it is as we go forward and look at trying to improve things, we'll be looking at the recommendations as you see in the pie chart at the bottom. And what we usually do, Grant, is we engage with professional standards, and we set up training inputs, and that ourselves deliver with with Professional Standards Department together. I certainly find that kind of joint input is much more effective than simply an oversight body coming in and delivering it. But we certainly work with PSD in that regard. So we look at the trends, we look at those pie charts, we look at the recommendations that we have made, and what we do is we develop the training input to try to avoid the same mistakes being made going forward. And that usually works quite effectively in my view, and that's probably what's behind the general improvement in the last couple of years, where we've been trying to deliver very specific inputs to the complaint handlers based on the recommendations that we've made, or the consideration directions, or any other issues that we identify. So yeah, in terms of the letters, I mean, I think you see in the pie chart, there was, things like there was a bit of an increase in terms of lack of apology in the final letter. So that's something that we can rectify relatively quickly. It's something that again, we can address quite effectively. Similarly, recording complaints. There has been some obviously new members PSD team joined in Caru unit. Unit is involved primarily in assessment, so naturally there probably would be some issues as staff are getting experience and getting comfortable with applying the statutory guidance and so on. So again, if there is a miscategorization of the complaint, we engage with professional standards. And last week, for example, we engaged in relation to a batch of cases where there was a similar issue appearing in terms of categorization and the kind of rationale adopted there. Discussed it with representatives from 3 different regional PSD hubs, and reached the agreement, and the matters are being progressed. So that's how we try to address the issues that are arising, and the final response issues, insufficient inquiries and letters are will be addressed as I think in the similar manner, with the assessment of where the issues are, and thereafter engaging with the professional standards department and speaking directly to the complaint handlers and just highlighting where things have gone wrong in the past so that we can improve in the future.
Thank you very much, Julia. There's no doubt that understanding which of the recommendations relate to the period before the current model was introduced and subsequently, I think is probably extremely relevant, and hopefully the legacy issues will drop off over time. But I think for John's team and everybody else, I think it's particularly important to understand what issues are current under
Absolutely.
the current model, to be able to sort of, if you like, nip these issues in the bud to try and actually see immediate progress going forward. So thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, Grant. Paul?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think the last interchange has been really rich and very, very interesting. And it's thrown up about 4 or 5 questions for me, which subsequently you dealt with almost all but one. And the one is when you make reference to statutory timetables, and for very good reason not meeting those. And I understand you go back and you explain to the complainant because it's complex cases and so on. Are there any consequences of that, of not meeting the statutory timetable? Are there any penalties or anything like that that are imposed upon PERC?
On PERC?
Yeah.
Or
would it be who's not meeting the timetable? Would that be PERC or would that be Police Scotland?
Well, I think in complex cases, neither of us may meet the timescales that we set ourselves. So, for example, in terms of Police Scotland are naturally adhering to the PERC statutory guidance. So this is where the 56 days comes in. In terms of PERC, we have our own strategic objectives, how we want to deliver our service and how quickly we want to conduct the reviews. So this is where I think in the past, I think I probably mentioned it during our last meeting that I don't think there is currently a KPI or a certain objective set by the professional standards in terms of meeting that timescale. John might correct me if I'm wrong. I think Police Scotland are generally trying to meet it in every case, and thereafter, produce their stats now in terms of the timescales. In terms of the PERC, I think we recognise that there will be complex cases. That's why we're looking to, in terms of our strategic objectives, they're published on our website. We're looking to complete 80% of our complaint handling reviews within 4 months. Now, obviously, that's subject to us having all the information we need to complete that review. That's why we introduced the timescales in terms of waiting for additional information as well. So in terms of your specific question, whether there is any penalties, for Police Scotland or the PERC, no, there are not penalties, but the Commissioner is answerable to the Scottish Parliament, naturally, for our performance, and I'm sure if we don't do well, questions will be asked. And you know, in terms of Police Scotland, I'm sure the committee and the PERC may ask questions if the timescales are slipping. So,
the diplomatic way of putting it is taken to task by parliamentarians. Yeah.
Perhaps.
Great. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Alistair.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions at this point? No. So, as Paul just said, that was a very rich discussion that we had there, Ilya. So, thank you very much for that. I think it actually reinforced a lot of the points that John was making in his report earlier, you know, particularly around that desire to be a learning organisation. And so I was really pleased to hear about the sustained improvement and the number of reasonably handled complaints that are reviewed from Police Scotland. And we've just had a long conversation about, you know, what the main learning issues are, which are highlighted in your recommendations. And I'm sure that those will be, as you've described, focused on and addressed going forward. The new complaints handling model, we look forward to that bedding in and getting a better understanding of it. You highlighted the value of frontline resolution, which is significant, which hopefully frees up capacity, which is always an issue in terms of dealing with these complex allegations. And they're complex because the world is complex, and the cases that come along are complex. So it was good to have a discussion on that. And I think the point for me is that you've highlighted that the public now have a better understanding of the role of PERC, and that adds value because they're a very important check and balance and have a clear statutory role within it. I think the last question around penalties and the 56 days, I think what we you know, for members in our workshop, we can perhaps have a look at, you know, all those timelines and that, and it would just be helpful to have clarity in our mind. So thank you for that. Okay, if there's no further questions, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which I believe we will be staying with yourself, Ilya, and you're giving us a verbal update on the joint audit work between the SP and PERC. Just an update on where we are with that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I believe the committee had an opportunity to see the terms of reference for the audit. So I'll provide an update where we are just now. The terms of reference have been shared with Police Scotland, and I'm grateful to John and his team for the assistance that they have provided to us so far in facilitating this audit. As the committee will be aware, it probably in terms of the PERC, it's probably the first audit for some time in terms of the complaint handling system. I believe we probably, in terms of complaint handling specifically, it probably was good 3 or 4 years before we since we did an audit. So in this regard, this audit is something that we've been looking forward to. It's primarily focused on recommendation 42 within Dame Elish's report, which is primarily in respect of the initial triage and assessment of the relevant complaints. Specifically, recommendation 42 referred to the National Gateway Unit. That has been excluded from the scope of the audit because I don't think the National Gateway Unit actually receives any complaints from members of the public as such. So instead, it's focused on the National Complaint Assessment and Resolution Unit, who ultimately are responsible for receipt and assessment of the complaints. You'll see that the recommendation of 42 also refer to Article 3 and 5 matters. Allegations of a potential breach of Article 3 and 5. As the committee will be aware, a new system for dealing with these type of allegations has been put in place by Police Scotland, the Crown and the PIRC in October of last year. There is currently a procedural review underway in relation to that model. So you will see from the terms of reference that Article 3 and 5 allegations have been excluded from the terms of the audit for that specific reason. In terms of more practical arrangements, we hope to commence the audit on 7th of March. We've been in discussions with Professional Standards Department who have provided us with the necessary information to assist us with identifying the relevant files that will be subject to examination. We've also been discussing practical arrangements in terms of the PIRC and the SPA complaints team shadowing or interviewing, discussing the processes with Professional Standards Department teams. So we're quite keen to make sure that this is not a simple, let's say, paper exercise. So we want to get involved with the NCARU team, with the regional teams to understand better the processes, to see where we can strengthen the process, where we can maybe identify some weaknesses that we need to address, and so on. So in that regard, I anticipate that the examination of the files will start on the 7th of March. We anticipate that will initially we put this down to for approximately 3 weeks, but we're flexible in this regard, and if matters, if once we start, perhaps we need a little bit more time, then we've built that into our terms of reference to extend that slightly. So I think in terms of data analysis and perhaps looking to get the report ready, I think we're probably talking close to probably Q2 of the next financial year. The SPA's complaints team members are part of the joint audit team. So I'm aware that the SPA have remote access to Centurion. So again, there may be opportunities to utilise that. But over and above that, members of the audit team will be in attendance in Dilmarnock office, and there are another, I think, probably 2 meetings later on this week to finalise the practical arrangements in relation to this audit. So overall, I'm pleased with we're making good progress. I'm grateful to John's team for assisting us in this regard, and I'm genuinely looking forward to the to getting the audit done, and looking at the findings. But ultimately, yeah, I think our main aim in this audit is to provide the assurance that the allegations, the complaints that are coming, and they're received by Police Scotland are appropriately assessed and progressed according to the assessment through the right procedure. So that's the probably general update, but I'm happy to answer any questions committee may have.
Okay, that's appreciated, Ilya. Any questions from members? No. Anybody else got anything they'd like to add at this point? No. Okay, no, that was really helpful. Ilya, we've got the terms of reference. You're going to, you've got a few I's to dot and T's to cross in terms of practicality, but you intend to commence on the 7th of March, and then there's analysis work to take part to take place after that, but we're hoping for a report coming back by the second quarter of the next financial year. And it's really good to hear about, you know, the cooperation and support, which is, of course, not unexpected from PSD. And it takes us back to my theme for today, which is becoming a learning organisation, because audit clearly is an important part of that. So much appreciated in terms of that update. Okay, so if we can move on to the next item on the agenda, 6.1, which is the independent review of complaints, handling investigations and misconduct issues in relation to policing. And this is going to be introduced for us by Darren Patterson. So Darren.
Thank you, Chair. So this again is a regular update on progress to deliver against recommendations where either Damien Eilish herself or Scottish Government have subsequently identified a specific implementation role for the SPA, which is those recommendations are highlighted yellow in the attached action plan, as well as others where the SPA have otherwise identified an action that we need to take forward. So as I say, the action plan is attached and is up to date. It has been, these are used to inform the submissions to the Scottish Government as part of the National Governance and Reporting arrangements, and the most recent of those submissions was made on the 8th of February. In terms of the overall recommendations where we've identified or say Damien Eilish, Scottish Government have identified an implementation role. Of the total 31 originally, 20 of those are now marked as complete. I referenced earlier on the work that has been progressed in relation to training for the SPA complaints team, which relates to one of those specifically. And my intention would be to hopefully bring that back to the next committee, proposing that to be discharged. Obviously, Elia has also there referenced the joint audit. And whilst that is not a recommendation directed at the SPA, it's nevertheless one which we have identified we have a key role in. However, that also links to another of the recommendations, which you'll recall was around the SPA, including a statement in its annual report and accounts as to the suitability of the Chief Constable's complaint handling arrangements. Obviously, the assessment that the committee undertakes in respect of the Police Scotland reports to the committee will form one element of that, but also the findings of the joint audit will additionally inform that. And the expectation is there will be, you know, given the statutory function that the PERC also have in respect of assessing suitability, it's expected that in due course there will be a committee discussion jointly around about that inclusion in the annual report and accounts. There are only 3 other recommendations which are specifically directed at the SPA. 2 of those essentially relate to that kind of broader point around about suitability, and it's around about the committee's role in assessing that suitability. And as you'll see from there, the actions stemming from that are linked to the development of Police Scotland reports. And obviously we've talked about the workshop that's happening in March. And then lastly, recommendation around consideration of ethics. You'll see that the action has been to identify, to develop an ethical oversight framework. That's now linked into a national Scottish Government work stream in respect of data ethics. So there has been a wee bit of a delay there, but recognising that kind of broader dependency. But essentially, all recommendations, we you know, even with those dependencies, we expect these will all be concluded within the next financial year, and hopefully, actually, you know, by the end of Q3 of next year. So all is positive. The reports also covers updates in respect of recent meetings as part of National Governance and Reporting arrangements and the timescale for the subsequent meetings, culminating in the publication of the 3rd thematic progress report, which will cover the period to the end of this financial year, and that's currently anticipated to be published prior to the June Scottish parliamentary recess. The only final point I would note, and the committee will have an interest in this as it comes forward. Scottish Government are currently developing their full public consultation on recommendations from the review which either require or which are likely to require legislative change or the introduction of new legislation. That public consultation has been confirmed will take place in 2022, following which Scottish Government intends to bring forward a bill, bill and regulations. So just to advise that is anticipated shortly. Thanks, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Open it up. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Grant.
Thanks, Mr. Excuse me, Darren. That's very helpful update. I think to me, it's not really a question other than an observation that there will be a public expectation that we're able to actually deliver the recommendations within the timescale, rather than the timescales having to slip for whatever reason. And there are one or two of these milestones that have had to slip for reasons that have been explained. I just wanted to be sure that you're sufficiently confident that there's enough progress being made to deliver in the dates that you now have by the end of the current financial year and into 22-23, because I think that would be very reassuring in what we actually are able to say in our annual report for 21-22 as it comes through and be published in the course of the current calendar year.
Thanks, Grant. So first of all, to say that these timescales are timescales that we have set ourselves, as opposed to them having been set by others. I think insofar as all that is within the gift of ourselves to deliver, I'm entirely confident. And in fact, as I say, essentially of those 5 which are specifically directed at the SPA, of the one relating to training, it's simply a matter of timing. I opted to set a closure date of the end of the financial year, really to link in with our appraisal cycle, if you like, to be able to kind of close off the appraisals with the team and then submit that evidence forward. But I'm entirely confident with the work that I've described to you, that will be put forward for discharge. Similarly, the SP annual report accounts, that the timescale for that is determined in terms of the publication of the annual report and account. In conjunction with PERC will make an assessment. So we're content. I'm content that you will be able to do that. I suppose that the question is around about the information which is available in order for you to make that assessment. So, if the joint audit is published in time, that's a key piece of evidence to support that. And similarly, in terms of the development of the Police Scotland reports, will provide further assurance information on which the committee can make such a statement. So, yeah, insofar as everything which is in the gift of the authority, entirely confident that we can meet those timescales, but noting there are dependencies there, in respect of the ethical oversight framework around about that IEG, the Scottish Government IEG, as I referred to in the action plan, and similarly in terms of the engagement with Police Scotland around about future development of the reports, and noting that workshop we have in March.
Thanks, Darren. The reason for referring to the timescale for information for the annual report and accounts is because I know that Martin Evans, as chair of the authority, is keen to have these drafted at a much earlier point in the post the year end than has been historically the case. So it's really just how the information dovetails in at the right stages. Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Grant. Unfortunately, I'm toggling between the papers and the agenda and that, so it just, the slight pause just highlights my perhaps need to learn to improve my IT skills. Okay, anybody else got any further questions for Darren? If not, can I move to the next item on the agenda, which I believe you're going to lead us through, John, which is same topic, but this is in relation to the work being undertaken by Police Scotland. 6.2.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and I won't rehearse what Darren has already comprehensively set out. But just building on the theme of today about learning organisation, I just wanted to say I really welcome and support the work that's been done around that audit and assurance, and it does make its way into this area of business as well. And one of the recommendations around, the publicising the right to complaint and understanding what the issues are. What I'd like to do is draw members' attention to page 3 of the report and the highlights that are there. Members will see that there's 4 recommendations out for consultation with a view to moving them to closure. Again, I'm hugely grateful to Elaine and our team for the support that's provided from HMI just in terms of that wider scrutiny element. Also, I've had the pleasure of sitting through a couple of meetings recently with staff associations, and I don't think we should fail to recognise the real positive input that the staff associations, both statutory and those that provide additional support to staff, provide in this space. They've got a hugely important voice, and sitting through the strategic oversight group chaired by ACC Spears, I saw firsthand see the importance of that input. Members will also note that there's 6 recommendations that Police Scotland is looking to advance by the end of this month. So no doubt by the time we meet at the workshop at the length of the month, we'll be able to give an additional update on that. In terms of the legislation piece, Darren made mention of that, and I think the information that we have from some conversations with Scottish Government is that they're looking to advance that in spring, so probably in the next 6 or 8 weeks I think we will see the start of that consultation. I think that's hugely beneficial and an opportunity that I know many will look to take in terms of the views of the recommendations, but also what we could do longer term insofar as making any legislative changes. Also attached to the report here is a summary of progress. I don't intend to go through that unless you specifically want me to, but it's there for members' information. And I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Okay, much appreciated, John. I'll open that up to members if they have any questions at this point. Okay. Oh.
Yeah. Recommendation 18. What's the status of that?
Thanks, Mr. Reedy. That's currently under review following some discussions with HMIC. As members will know, that DCC Taylor chairs the Oversight Board. So whilst the recommendation was put forward for closure, clearly we're saying that the framework and the procedures have been put in place, but that's been temporarily withdrawn, subject to some additional conversation and clarity around that.
And what were the concerns about that it's not been put to bed?
Maybe ask Elaine if she wanted to comment on that, if that was okay, Chair.
Of course, Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Reedy. Yeah, recommendation 18 is probably taken in 2 parts. So the first part of it is that broader fundamental review of equality matters, and also taking into account HMICS's at that time, the time the report was written, pending inspection of training and development, the phase 2, which was focusing on recruitment, retention, development and promotion of staff from underrepresented groups. So in terms of timeline, obviously DCC Taylor's group was set up in March 2021 in terms of that oversight. The independent review itself was established in September 2021, and then HMICS, we published our report in October 2021. HMI has attended the IRG and presented the findings, so we're satisfied that the second part of that has been discharged in terms of the group has taken into account the findings of that report, but it itself has still to report, and we understand that's going to be done later in the year. So our discussions with Police Scotland were, the group has been set up, the group has taken into account obviously the findings of the T&D, but actually, we need to give the group a chance to publish any findings or any report itself.
Great, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. And Paul, are you any further questions?
No, I'll wait for that in due course. I would just if there was a firm timetable, if there was a date, but you know, that we've got specified for this being closed off. That's maybe for Mr. Patterson.
Yeah.
I think that just picking up on Elaine's point, it will be progressed through DCC Taylor's board, so I don't have a date as yet for when that report will come through, but I can bring that back to the committee.
I was conscious it was possibly an unfair how long is a piece of string question when I pitched it, which is why I wasn't going to. Anyway, thank you very much. That's really helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Grant?
Thanks, Chair. John, really just, I'm trying to just clarify one area. It's on page 3, the 6 recommendations that the Police Scotland aim to complete in advance of the internal March 22 target date. I know we're now into March, so the question is really how confident are you that these will all 6 of these will actually be completed in the course of this month?
From the information I have, Mr. McCrea, as confident as I can be, they're on track. So that's why I said hopefully by the time we meet at the end of the month, I'll be able to give you that assurance that they're done. But based on all the information that I have just now, I'm comfortable that we'll meet that internal date.
Right, thank you very much.
Okay, any further questions, comments from anybody? No, that's really helpful, John, and that helps us to close off one of the points in the earlier action log, and it really is helpful for, to see those indicative dates, and appreciate the amount of work that is being undertaken, because the proper implementation and embedding of Dame Elish's recommendations, the importance of it cannot be overstated, and it needs to be done robustly but also in a timely fashion. So really helpful report, so thank you for that. Elaine, I know you've already came in and you've helped answer some of the members' questions, but there's a section on the agenda if there's anything you'd like to highlight or add at this moment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's just to say, obviously, the timelines in terms of reporting structures are set out through work with governance, audit and assurance, and indeed PSD. We are now aligned to that in such a way that John has mentioned the 6 recommendations that are coming up. We're aware that they're coming up. We've obviously got our reporting processes with audit and assurance in place, and we'll aim to meet with them and PSD before the end of the month. That adds a consistency of approach. These discussions are I hope are very helpful, and the input from audit and assurance means that there is that high quality in terms of standard of evidence submission, which it comes across in all of the recommendations. There is a whole host of activity that is ongoing, across very different strands of Police Scotland. Recommendation 14, as John has outlined, in terms of police promotion. I mean, that suffice to say that's been a whole system review of the selection process. That was something when we looked at this in training and development 1 was just getting off the ground, and has had a year plus to be rolled out. But what I would say is, it's particularly for the likes of that one, the outcomes of that will be much slower time. What we've seen is clear leadership and vision in terms of the direction of travel, supported very much by policy and considerations around EQHRIA. But the proof in the pudding will be the impact of that moving through time. So we are certainly putting that forward to the Strategic Oversight Group as recommended for closure, with the caveat that obviously the development work in and around training and development 1 will pick up that longer time progress and improvement. And as has been spoken about today, that organisational learning that will take place. I'll just pause there.
Thank you for that. I'll open it up. I see, Grant, you've raised your hand. Do you have a question for Elaine?
Yes, thank you. I'm not absolutely sure whether it's to Elaine or John or the two together, but in the chart that shows the recommendations, numbers 61 and 78 refer to audit arrangements using Audit Scotland and publishing performance in dealing with complaints, and both are shown delayed to June 22. I'm not absolutely sure whether that means they're delayed now beyond June 22, but I wondered if either of you could comment on what it's going to take to unlock the communication to actually move these two recommendations forward. Thank you.
My understanding, Mr. McCrea, is that they're delayed until June 22. I think the reference there is to year-end reporting and making sure that the reports coincide, as the chair was already saying about, or yourself, sorry, about making sure that we can get the right information to inform annual reports. It actually links in slightly to some of the issues that it was remiss of me not to highlight when I spoke earlier about the data group that's now been set up that I chair, so that we can get that consistency. And I know that's similar within SPA and PERC. So we need to make sure that we've got that richer picture, that information that we can then bring forward. So my understanding is they're delayed until June 22. I hope that helps.
Thank you. It's certainly that there's reference to dependent and partnership work with PERC. That's why I wasn't absolutely sure who is in the driving seat for it. So unless Elaine's got anything to add, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So, Elaine, I mentioned earlier that you've agreed to give up some of your time and come along to these future meetings, and that really is appreciated. The work that the HMI does across the board is invaluable, but particularly in relation to the ongoing implementation of Dame Eilish's recommendations. That assurance and the insights is excellent, and you given the time to share that, what work and highlight particular areas to this committee is helpful. So thank you very much for that. Okay. Any final points or questions from anybody? Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda then. Thank you. Which is number 7, which is the COP26 complaint outcomes. And John, again, this is one for you to lead us through.
Thanks again, Chair. I'm aware that this was something that was discussed at previous committees, and ACC Spears committed to bring forward a report. I won't rehearse the full details. I know that members will be well aware of the whole of COP26. The breakdown of the 27 complaints, it was 53 separate allegations, 2 of which were criminal in nature. The table on page 3 of the report breaks those down even further. Again, picking up on the theme that Ilya raised earlier as well, that 20 of the complaints were dealt with by way of frontline resolution, and 13 of the complaints related to quality of service concerns. Members will note that there's 3 still outstanding. 2 of them are related to ongoing criminal matters, which clearly we won't want to go into here because of the nature of them. The complaint handling review, the learning part, I was really pleased to take part in the SMART 2 exercise. In a previous role, I was heavily involved in SMART 2 during my role in COP26 and saw the real value that they bring to policing and that wider partnership learning. And in terms of the PSD elements, the debrief took place on the 1st of February, and that will allow us to take that learning forward, even in the short time whilst we await their final report. But I could give members the assurance that what we had put in place and the structures that we'd put in place worked very well in terms of managing the issues that were flagged up to the organisation. I don't propose to go into any more detail, Chair, because it's all contained in the report, unless there's any specific areas that members want me to cover.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And highlighting these important areas. Open it up to members if they've got any questions at this stage. Yeah. Okay, so no questions from the members there. You mentioned the SMART2 exercise in that and potentially learning outcomes coming from that. Would there be an opportunity to share that with the members going forward?
Yes, Chair, of course, we await the final report from SMART2 on it. So members will be aware that leading up to COP26, PSD, amongst many other departments, took part in a number of tabletop exercises with SMART2. Thereafter, we had the tabletop to review, did all the planning that we put in place work, and that report from SMART2, once it comes through, will bring the two areas together, show what went well, what areas that we can learn for the future, and any processes. So I commit when that report is available to share it with members through yourself, Chair.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. That would be appreciated. And I know there's still analysis and learning to be identified, but the relatively low number of complaints, given the scale of the event, I think is really testament to the amount of pre-planning that went in and then the execution of those plans by Police Scotland. So just wanted to make sure that's highlighted. So thank you for that. Okay, any final questions or points? Thank you. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is for myself, which is the committee work plan, which I know has been shared with members. But just to highlight, if there's anything you feel is missing from that, then Colette would be more than happy to capture that, and we can consider that further to enhance our work plan going forward. But does anybody have any comments on the work plan? No. Okay, so we'll progress that as indicated, with that offer to add anything as it arises as the year progresses. So that brings us to the end of the public part of this session. So we need to pause